All right, folks. I think we are. All right. If you are around, can you put in what you had for breakfast this morning? That is my personal favorite question. Wherever you're watching this, we're testing out this week. I'm streaming on YouTube, LinkedIn, and we're also here live. So we're going on a couple of different things just to try that out. This is what we want to call a workshop and not a webinar. All right. So do not hesitate to ask questions. I'm going to go into all the questions as much as I possibly can. I will pause throughout. So if you have a question, a scenario, drop it in. We want to get through it. So we'll consider this workshop, not a actual webinar. I hope you learn some things. My name is JJ Reynolds. While people are coming in, I want to first ask, put in what you had for breakfast in the chat. I'm going to check YouTube as well as here. What did you have for breakfast this morning? I'm going to go first. I had the what did I have? I had egg bites from Costco. So we have a croissant sandwich coming in the chat, and I had egg bites. So we are uh, there we go. So coffee, that's also classic. I've got this to join you in the chat. So guys, I'm just gonna hop into it. We are recording this, so I always want to make sure people do have that. We are going to actually test out this AI workflow of sending you a recording as well as a summary, so that you don't have to watch the recording. You can get a summary after this as well, because it is going to be real good content here. So, without any further ado, I am going to just jump into it. And as we go along, if you do have questions, guys, put them in the chat. All right. So let's see if this works out. There we go. So uh, we are going to be talking about dashboards here, folks. The idea here is, how do we make profit and data turn into profit? That is something that previously I was very much on trends and patterns. But now with new tools, with the idea around centralizing data, building on top of each other, we are able to say, how do we produce actual meaningful results from your data? And you're not just looking at who am I? My name is JJ Reynolds. We work with brands anywhere from honestly like $5 million in revenue to, like, we have a couple that are up in the billions of revenue now, and they trust us. We are a fractional team. We work with companies to build out systems and structures and training so that you know how to use your data to go out into the world and take better actions, and ideally automate those actions, which we'll talk about here shortly. I live out in Reno, Nevada. If you are familiar with Lake Tahoe, that's where I live. And I'm very passionate about volleyball, beach volleyball. Today, I'm going to go and play a tournament as well. So if you want to play beach volleyball in Tahoe, let me know. And here is my actual email address. Email me, JJ at Vision Labs, any questions at all. If you want to work with us from your brand's perspective, do not hesitate to reach out. Or if you do have any questions about follow-ups, guys, I'm an open book. My promise today is that you will know what you need to do in order to make your data start working towards profit. That is the promise. Is I want to see, how do you layer things together to work towards the outcomes of data. And I'm not going to be talking about like MMM and MTA and MWA or whatever the heck newest attribution model is. I am firmly in the stance of those will keep changing, and it doesn't really matter, right? Someone somewhere is going to develop a new model that's like, hey, it's the double helix reverse induction MAA. And cool, we'll just start using that. I don't care about those. There's someone somewhere that has a PhD in this that it will be better, and I promise you it'll be better than anything you can cook up. So don't hang your hat on me promising you some forensic future of data that will just randomly be out there. Why should you trust us? We work with brands all over the globe, from info products to e-commerce to high ticket sales to low ticket sales to subscription services to info. Those are all the brands that trust us. We work with them day in, day out to provide them meaningful reporting and meaningful data structures that they can act on. So if you have any questions at all, guys, reach out to us. So this is historically, this is a dashboard from our actual dashboard. I screenshotted this, I think 2 days ago when I was actually reviewing our own Vision Labs data. And the question here is like, what now, right? This has all the structure you could ever need. It has the number of people who have seen the lead magnets, how many people are downloading our lead magnets, what the volume is, how many sessions are actually driving to our website. All the information is here. Almost any question you could ask, I've got built out in our internal reporting. And that is just on us to go and execute against that, right? But it's still on us to go and execute. We have to say, what's the gap between this? And then now what do we want to do with that? That's what you really are kind of responsible for, is like, you have this gap and now we're going to fill the gap. And historically what that looks like is this, right? So we have taking action automatically by people. So you're just out here taking action when you're in the startup phase or the small business phase or the mid business phase, or you're just a new department, right? You're the marketing person at this department. You're like, I'm going to go take an action, whatever I think it is that will drive a meaningful result. And then we hit this hump of overcomplicating everything. This is where people start layering complexity for complexity's sake because someone somewhere said it was a good idea. And that is where we run into problems, right? Where people start having more complexity for the sake. And then at the bottom down here is you have take actions either automatically or systematically based off of the questions that you've started asking. So you can say, hey, how well is X performing? Or what lead magnet are we driving the highest revenue from? And that is a very loaded question, but you can build an answer to then say, okay, let's now drive more revenue. A very simple way of thinking about this is saying, when you take someone to that destination of saying, going from, hey, it's getting more complicated to getting less complicated, is what actions can you actually take? And how would you do that if you had no human in the loop interactions, right? So say, for example, you have a heat map on a table where you say, this is the outliers. These are the outliers on our questions. Well, those outliers you usually go take action on. What does that look like? So first off, I want to put, anybody, have you seen the do? The data order of operations is how we drive businesses forward. If you have not downloaded this yet, go to visionlabs.com/DOO, and you can get a little mini training and a copy of this. Historically, I've talked a lot about conversion tracking, tag management systems, building your plan, behavioral tracking. That's the bottom half of the do. Today, I want to talk a little bit more about the top half of the do. This is the part where we start getting into exciting territory, where the CEO, the CMO, the VP start getting excited because you're starting to use your data and activate it to drive a meaningful interaction. As you can see, this is a pyramid, right? So you have to have the initial steps first, and then you layer up, right? So you have conversion tracking, you layer on tag management, you layer on your planning, your behavioral tracking, your visualizations, your first party data, then data sharing, then cost, and then forecasting. People have to skip steps and it never works out well. That's where you end up in complexity for the sake of complexity's sake. So we're going to talk about this today. Just a quick reminder on the 3 outcomes of your data, a little bit in the way here, is you can field useful questions. That's honestly the majority of people's reporting is based off of fielding useful questions. Usefulness is objective or subjective because it's how you can act on it. You want to drive data pipelines. So that's saying, how do we field ad platforms and marketing automation tools and systems? How do you make them work for you? And I'm going to talk about that here in a second, how we do that. And that we've built out an entirely new system that we're rolling out to new customers right now. And the historical ones, we're getting to them as well. And then lastly is driving impactful action, right? Where you can take an action that you did not know before, and now you know how to do that. This is the flywheel that you really want to move towards. We use this as far as Vision Labs goes for our clients, but you can take this and use it within your organization, right? We have a single source of truth. You want daily updated custom reporting that is basically trying to tie everything to either profit or revenue. We'll talk about those different KPIs here in a second. And you want to have consistent and constant, unbiased feedback from your team, right? Where things start to really run into problems is when you have interpretation that is not unbiased. Every media buyer on planet Earth is saying they're doing a good job. I promise you. So that's what you want to have. Oops, we have an animation out of the place. Okay, so here's a couple of simple plays that I'm just going to cut to the chase. Is lead to revenue. How do you drive? Which lead magnet is driving the highest adoption of your product or the highest revenue? So which lead magnet is driving the highest adoption? Then you can layer in the costs and say, hey, which lead magnet is driving the highest adoption, as well as how much is it costing us to either get a trial or get someone to consume some content. Whatever that outcome is, you're driving things to lead magnet. Let's try to tie that back and to say, okay, should we spend more money or less money on this action? How do you correlate content or features or utility to a higher value lifetime value? How do you correlate those things together? Because that's something that if you can correlate those, you can act on and build things and say, okay, the video onboarding sequence is worth way more than the button on the page, right? Correlated. And then lastly is like automating something. So you're saying, hey, when someone engaged with this content or does this thing and builds out this flow in our app or consumes this content or builds this bundle on the website, how do we build out an automatic system, SMS, push notification, email, driving them to take an action at the perfect point in time? This is historically like the marketing, close to the marketing center of saying, hey, this is how we've positioned this in the past. Right? You have your team, you then have your data, you have a warehouse, you work with somebody, in this case, I'm positioning Vision Labs, and then you have visualizations and then communication. That's very marketing focused. We're not here to talk about marketing. We're here to talk about how do you make this stuff work. So here's what that looks like. This is what we're going to talk about today, building out this data workflow in a way that makes sense for your organization. This can change, right? So I'm going to give a generic playbook, but if you're in e-commerce, you might want to use Klaviyo. And if you're in info products, you might want to use PostHog. If you're in content, you might want to use Segment. I don't really care about the tools. I'm going to tell you what we're using for like our clients, and you can swap out tools. I don't really care about tools. So what we have here is this idea of a CDP. This might be new to some people. I'm saying, what the heck is a CDP? I hear about it. It's the elusive CDP, the customer data platform that people talk about. The generic CDP idea is that you centralize data based off of user profiles. And a user profile, I like to think of as an email address. It's just a simpler way to think about it. It's saying, hey, this customer is Susan at banthony.com, and that person has done all of these actions. So we want to start seeing how do we get this data into the CDP in a way that makes sense. So we have our CRM data, we have our product data, we have our sales data. We also have screen recordings. If you can't see that at the very bottom left, you also have feedback, right? All of this data you want to try and centralize so that one record can be easily accessible, saying, hey, what is Susan B. Anthony's current place and how do we push them over the edge? We deploy that via Tag Manager, and people are like, whoa, how does that work? Don't worry, I'll talk about that in a sec. Then you have your idea of your ad platforms. You have Google Ads, you have Facebook ads, whatever else. And then we have BigQuery as a warehouse, and we have Looker Studio as a visualization layer. That's what we're doing out here. And you can swap out these tools, but the CDP being different, but the majority of everything else is kind of the same. You got BigQuery, you got Looker Studio. And the outcome here, right, is visuals and systems that drive towards increasing the numbers you want to. The way I like to think about this is that you have a beautiful ingredients, a charcuterie board, if you might say, of ingredients that you get to make whatever you want. And the three outcomes you get are insights, automations, and reporting. Those are the outcomes. You can have some collard greens that we got there. We got some spaghetti as the automations. We got reporting as the cake. But what goes into that is your leads, your screen recordings, your surveys, your accounts, your transactions. All those things kind of go together to build out how do you drive insights, automations, and reporting. It's an all-you-can-eat buffet out there. There's so many tools. There are so many things. And my biggest gripe in here is that everybody is so siloed. It is remarkable at how siloed everything is because uh, like every tool is kind of cannibalizing another tool. Microsoft Clarity gets introduced. Go use that. But now it's a different ID. So then you have GA4, you've got Clarity, you've got CDP thing. You've got all these tools, none of them talk to each other, right? So that's a problemo. And if they do talk to each other, it is a nightmare to get them to integrate together. So here's your roadmap to start, right? How do we start this from the ground up? You're looking at your company and you're like, guys, we are so messed up. Don't like, we got to figure out how to get the plan forward from here. This is how we can start. Is you can start with asking a question. That question can be strategic or tactical. I don't care. I'll give you some questions here in a second. We want to design the data collection system. Spelled design wrong. And then we're going to say, how do we get that to an action as fast as possible? The time to action, we want to compress. And then we're going to overlay our intentions and our outcomes. So what are we trying to do? A couple of examples here is you could say, we're trying to run people to a funnel, and that funnel is supposed to drive a revenue that is supposed to cover the cost of the ad spend. That ad spend then drives profit for the lifetime value after 30 days, for an example. And then the holy grail here is where you can automate that and say, we know our intentions and our outcomes, and we can use these automations to push people over that edge in a very loving and kind way, because we don't want to push people over edges. So this is how we're going to start asking good questions, because this is how we frame a good question. Here's my little ChatGPT image of the funnel, the margin, the cost, revenue, and volume going to build your house. You're framing it out. So what are you trying to do? I want, if you are comfortable, is what is something that you're trying to do? Are you trying to generate leads, generate revenue, generate what? Because everybody's going to say something slightly different. And I've asked this question a lot, where you say, hey, what are we trying to do here? And everybody takes a step back and says, okay, well, why are we shipping this feature? Okay, we're trying to get someone to value it more. Why are we doing this other thing? Why are we trying to push people into subscriptions? Okay, we think that subscriptions will push them towards a higher lifetime value. Those are all hypotheses. Yes. And so we have the idea of this. So what are you trying to do? And I kind of like to frame it like this. We have the idea of a funnel. We have the idea of costs, the volume, and margin, and revenue. So what do I mean by those? Is you might be trying to drive, if you're a direct response company, you have a funnel, right? People see this page, they do this thing, they do this thing. This is the outcome that we drive. A lot of info companies operate like this. We have the cost. So I can do infinite volume if our costs remain under this thing. So that could be where you have a software or an e-commerce product where you know what your actual, like you say, hey, I make $1 on every sale. I have 99 cents to sell infinitely. Software and e-commerce kind of operate like this depending on how hard it is to produce your e-commerce product. We then have volume, where you might have volume targets if you're trying to hit a certain volume to grow. Say, hey, we did 1,000 last year. We're going to do 10,000 this year. That's a 10x growth rate. So we're trying to hit this volume, and it is okay if we lose money because we're venture backed. And then we have margin and revenue. So margins, we're trying to maintain 30% margins on something and keep trying to move forward on that. Where'd the rest of my things go? Okay. So here's the funnel idea. Costs is you can also break things down as like cost per outcome, total spend if you're a startup, volume 100 times a day, margin X per sale, X per day, revenue is total growth, right? So saying, hey, how do we grow this? And again, ask a question. What are we trying to do? Design your data collection system to try and fuel that question. Then you're going to tie that to an action. And then you're going to layer that back with your intention and your outcomes. And then you're going to try and figure out how to systemize or automate that action. When we talk about input data, these are a few of the things that I like to think about, right? So you've got the idea of forms. That's usually like a lead form or a purchase form or any of those types of forms. They're all this, a purchase is just a form submission with a credit card number. And that automatically charges your credit card. But the idea is that you have all these inputs that you're going to drive down the line into either profit or revenue. But how do we take these inputs and store them in a way that they can be unified together? Because the same person, right, Susan at banthony.com, they submitted a form. They also did a purchase. They interacted with your product features, whether that's an e-commerce product or a a SaaS product. You have their screen recordings. You've asked them survey questions, and you have all this data that you're just kind of sitting in all these different silos, either from a communication problem or an actual technology integration problem. So how do we get those to talk together? And that's what you should be working towards. If you can get all of these talking together, as well as you can ingest questions, which we'll talk about here in a second, you can start building out reporting that makes sense. So again, what we want to try to avoid at all costs is where someone looks at a report and says, "Now what?" You're like, "Okay, we haven't outlined what our goal is, our intention to tying it to actual profit." And this is where, again, we as a team try to get towards this. It's very difficult. I'm not saying that this is an easy roadmap, everybody. This is not one of those things where you push the 6 buttons and you will now be printing dollars. But what I am saying is that if you take this and you say, "Now what?" and then you answer that question next. Cool, we are dipping in traffic, or we don't have as many lead magnets that we should be doing. Now what? Do we need to create more lead magnets? Do we have to add more traffic? What do we do now? And those are the questions that you really should be trying to push forward. And it's the easiest way to drive an outcome is that you can say, "Cool, we have revenue broken down by the product. Now what? Should it have been more? Do we have a target? Are we trying to sell this thing?" And those questions can drive people to take actions. And if you can get it systemized enough, you can drive outcomes. So let me, oh, my thing. Okay. So here's my little diagram here. Is what we want to try and do is take your tagging, right? That's step 1 of the do, the data of operations. And we want to take your testing, which is like step 6 of the do. And we want to systemize everything towards that so that if we line all of these up, we can work towards profit. And if you know why you're making profit, right? We can take $1 in either advertising or capital expenditures or people. And you can systemize that to say, "Hey, we have a profit. What does that look like?" Well, now we have something that we're working towards. So where do you look is the core question, like to answer these questions. How do you center that and what actions will you take? So let me just talk through. We're going to have a how with technology and strategy, right? There's the strategy idea of how do we ask better questions, which is more of like, once you learn that strategy aspect, it's very easy to execute, but hard to master. And then technology, or how do you integrate technology together in a way that we can then say, now I don't have a technology limitation. PSA, the big problem is usually communication and siloed information. That's like the PSA here because that is normally problematic. So strategy, what are you trying to do? How do you map these questions to actions? And how would you see success? These are the 3 questions you can ask yourself. And we ask this on all of our new client onboarding. Like if you're saying, "Hey, let's do an audit, let's do this thing together," that is what we'd start with is what are you trying to do? And so take a moment here, just think about that. I'm going to take a sip of my coffee. But what are you actually trying to do? And you can focus on your previous questions and say, what questions are we asking? And you're like, growth. Cool. Awesome. A while back, we worked with a nonprofit that serviced like lower income communities in the state of California. And they were like, I was like, what are you guys trying to do? Like, how do you know if it was successful? Because you give away money. Like, how do you know if your website's working? And what do you mean by working? And so we had to come up with a method of saying, what are we actually trying to do here so that we know if we can dump more money into this to achieve the desired outcome? And what is the target? So for them, it was number of people per dollar. So how many people could we get reach to about the social services per dollar that we spent? That's not normal, right? Like you're like, that's a weird use case, JJ. Why'd you bring that up? Because most for-profit businesses are very straightforward. You drive leads, you drive revenue, you have conversions, and you have traffic. That's about it, folks. But how you do that is very different. So then you want to say, how do you map those questions to actions? For example, hey, we got this question from the VP of Finance. They're asking about, was our meta spend profitable? Or whatever the question might be. How do you field those questions in a way that like makes sense? We use a Google Sheet. I'll show you that here in a second, but we just use a Google Sheet for clients that says, hey, here's the question. How do you decide to action that question? And then how do you know what success is? And what once you have that success, what now? Right? Hey, my question would be, is Meta, are leads generating revenue? The answer to that is yes. Okay, how much revenue? $10 per lead. Cool. Is that enough? Right? So we want to try and systemize how we get to that. So does anybody have any questions? I'm just going to pause here for a moment because I know there's a little bit of a delay. But does anyone have any questions about structuring those conversations to say, how do we ask better questions? And how do we start to structure things to say, we need one place to go? Otherwise, it becomes really complicated to try and stitch together a unified outcome. And I'm going to talk through that CDP here in a second of how we do it. But if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to ask. And I'm going to check on YouTube and LinkedIn just to see how those things are going. Cool. All right. We're going to keep on moving here, folks. So if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to drop them. I know there's a lot of looky-loos. So this is the data of operations. It's how we structure things. So don't hesitate to reach out and we can talk about technology. Okay. I actually am going to show you on a live diagram of how do we do this. Oh, great question. Dominic asked, how do we ask a good question? And let me go back to here, our strategy thing here. It's how do we ask a good question? And let me just walk through, just because I really do like this question. It's so pivotal. Hey, there we go. How do we ask a good question? The way that we structure this is that you can say, there's the question, what information do you need to answer that question? And then what action will you take depending on what that question is? If there is no action that you can take based on that question, it's a dumb question. Like there isn't really anything that you can do. And that goes very straightforwardly to saying, hey, do people who do this thing also do this thing on our website? Like kind of a correlation analysis. And if I say yes, well, then now what? I'm like, yeah, they're correlated. 90% of people who do that too. And you might have no idea on what to do next because you might not be the right person to do that. But if a product person gets asked that question, they're like, oh my goodness, if these things were correlated, then I would know that we need to add more features that are like this. And so the context of the utility of a question is based off of who is answering it and who is listening to that. Think of this in the context of also like CEOs, for example. CEOs sometimes will just get a roll-up report of saying, hey, here's what's happening with either a few metrics or a lot of metrics, depending on the type of CEO they are. And if they know the answer to their question, they might go really deep into the micro level of saying, why are we spending this much money per unit on these microchips in our phones or whatever else? The idea behind those questions is they know what they can do. They can influence it. They can take action on that. And this is one of the problems why in organizations that are more vertically oriented, right, where you have like a junior person, an entry level, a junior, a senior, a VP, a director, VP, whatever else, is that does the person who asks the question have the ability to take an action or at least deliver where the action could be? So that's a very long-winded question or answer to saying how do you ask a good question? It's one that can be actioned upon. And the more you can do that while you are asking questions, the better off you're going to be. So hopefully that answers the question. Great question. So, all right, we've got the do, we've got this. Let's talk technology, folks. I have a little data flow here. This is how we are going to do this. So let me push this button and let's zoom out. Let's start here. I think I talked about, oh, hey, there's a zoom. It works. Okay, so here is what we this is our default recommendation. Default by meaning saying, hey, here's what we'd say if you came to us and said, hey guys, we know we're not doing the best. We either need an audit or we need to start building together to have this data system working so that we now know where to take actions on. Well, what does that look like? Tag orchestration, Google Tag Manager. Data unification, we would use PostHog. Web analytics, GA4, just because it's a default and it's like free. But again, we're kind of even using that less, but it's still a good tool. Data routing between systems, we'd use either server-side tag manager, which is Google Tag Manager in the cloud, or NAN, which is low code. So server-side tag manager is more of a high code where you have a lot of developer resources to maintain and iterate on that. And then NAN is a lower code solution that we like to use. It's like a Zapier, but more for enterprises. Data warehousing would be BigQuery. It's where you store your data. Data connectors would for like ads and CRM and cart systems and pipelines would be Airbyte. A data visualization is Looker Studio. And then lastly, feedback, strategy, ingestion would be Google Sheets. This is in general how we'd recommend the basics of starting out. Right. If you take and layer this into Shopify, for example, you might say, hey, let's use Klaviyo because it's a CRM and CDP in one. Right. In maybe you want to try and have a different CDP like with Segment. Again, I don't know. I feel like every time I've seen Shopify and Segment try to go together, like it never works out well. But you get the idea, right? So different systems, you're going to have different orchestration tools and swap out PostHog for something else, swap out GA4 for something else, and those are the main two. Everything else kind of can remain the same, which is nice because Google Tag Manager works everywhere, and everything else more or less works everywhere. The CDP is what you want to probably swap out. So that's that. Let me now talk through this from a flowchart perspective. So, boop, here we are. So I showed this at the beginning, and this is where you kind of start to say, hey, how do we unify all this data together? This in here, we want to say we have an ID, a unification ID, a person ID is what I believe they call it. And we want to say, how do we store that data from the product when someone uses a feature? Hey, thumbs up. How do we store that data from sales when they move through pipeline stages? How do we store that from the screen recordings, right? How do we store that from the feedback that we receive? That then allows us to build these cohorts of people and say, hey, we now have cohorts of people who use this feature. And if we know what our question was to begin with, we can now build out reporting, now that the data is in BigQuery, that Looker Studio can connect to. And the beauty of this tooling set is that it's very customizable, right? You can customize data how you're asking your questions because you might have a question over time or over a very specific use case like that. You usually have to customize it, and that's where out of the box tools really fall short, right? Is the customization aspect. Either you're spending a ton of money to try and get this really customized thing you're kind of locked into, or you're spending no money and you don't get any customization because you're just using some free tool that like is a hit counter, a glorified hit counter. And so yeah, this is the gist of how we kind of structure things here. The next piece I want to really show through here is how do you field those questions, to Dominic, to your point here. Is you get a question, then you basically say, do we have the data? And if the answer is yes, cool, we have an answer. And then you can say, now what? And ideally there's an action, right? If there's no action, useless question. This is, again, is kind of my gripe with a lot of the like MMM models or MTA or the double helix induction one, is that like the answer to the question is like it's generally working, but what's working? I don't know. Is it this ad? Is it this campaign? Those become harder to answer. Where it's like, where do I spend more money? Is the question, and what should I do next? Is often hard. So that's why we want to structure this data in a way that we can start asking those questions and we know what to do. So if we don't have the data, is it an evergreen question? It's a very important thing because sometimes you want to ask a question and say, hey, how many people saw the footer and then also saw the header and then also saw the video? That's not an evergreen question. That's like a hunt and pet question where you're like, the reason why I'm asking this question is because we need to decide, should we add more links to the footer or not? Or should we add more people to the video onboarding sequence? I'm just making up examples here, but you get the idea. And so that's the structure, right? So say, how do we say these evergreen questions? If there is an evergreen question, we build out reporting for it. And ideally it's tied to an action. And if it's not an evergreen question, you can just go find it. Like just go write a quick query, go build something else. And then should the action work with marketing? So what I mean by this is saying, when you do have an action to take, is that something we have to flag it of saying, these are the most at-risk customers, for example, to leave, or these are the highest engaging landing pages, or this is the highest converting lead magnet. Those are more flags, right? Where you can say, we're sorting this from high to low by either visually, like hierarchical in your dashboards, or with colors, right? Hey, the red ones are good, green is good, red is bad. Uh, right. And then what action do you take? And this is where things start to really get spicy, because if you can say we're going to send these emails, if this is the case, if someone is moving between our sequence segments, like we're going to do this thing, what action do you take is going to be the question that I want to keep pressing people on, because so many teams have no idea what they're going to do with this data once they have it. And so again, that's why you work with like a partner where you say, hey, let's push back and say, what are we trying to do? And then let's drive that insight from those intentions. Again, long story short, you have to have insights to drive actions. And then what do you do with that marketing, right? You say, hey, let's take an action. Let's do this thing. Do we need to be automated, or is it a feature flag? So that is how you want to kind of structure your questions even more so, of saying, how do we build that out? And now you have a way to build reporting that actually is a function of that. Okay, so we've talked about some technology pieces. I gave you the tech stack that we use on our website, recommended for others, etc. On that, again, swap out whatever you want to. But the reason why we're recommending Posthog here is that it has that identification layer. There are other ways to do things. Again, not that it's the best way. It is a very cost-effective way, and it has a very low barrier to entry. But that's what we're recommending there. All right, so this is everyone's here. I know. You're like, where's the dashboard? Where's the dashboard? The most people view reports where it's too complicated. You either make it too interactive, where you have to push too many buttons to get to the action that you want, or it's just a too big of report. There is a use case for a big report, but most times you want to keep it short and to the point. Okay. So once you've worked through this, right, you've gone through the data order of operations, you've run through your intention and your outcome, you've decided on the tech stacks you're going to use, you've mapped out your data using that, you now have a way to say, okay, now we can build reporting that is based off of good questions, based off of what the intentions are of the organization, and we can drive those intentions to outcomes. So we know if we push this intention up, this outcome goes up. Try to avoid at all possibilities is making reports that are too long and too much data that no one knows what to do. The actions should be there to do. So we are coming here to the end. The biggest takeaway I want to show you guys is less is more, right? That is the biggest takeaway I can give you, is less is more. If you do have any questions, now is your time. The one last thing I'd like to share with you guys is that if you are looking for an audit and action plan, we do have this. We have a 4-week audit and action plan where we have Slack integration with you guys. We both run through both strategy and technical. We answers versus reality, and really try to say, how do we compare your intention and your outcomes. We want to review and test things, and then we're going to try and build out your execution plan so you know what to do next. If you have any ideas about trying to do that, visionlabs.com/contact, fill out a contact form, guys, and we will be with you. This is what we really want to try and get towards, is a single source of truth, that you can have daily updates, that you have constant unbiased feedback on what you should do next. So now I will hang out if there are any questions at all. Otherwise, I will see you guys around on the internet. I really do enjoy the interactions on the internet, but I'd love to hear if you did have any questions about either implementation, the strategy, the technology stack, or anything in between. Or we can all say goodbye together. I did realize that we do have a new thing. I can put a little banner up there. So that's nice and fun. All right. I'm not seeing any questions, but again, it is delayed. So I'm going to just hang out here for a few more. And I'm going to pull up this quick and dirty diagram. And make sure that we have everything. All right, guys. Well, yeah, if you have any other questions, guys, you have my email address, JJVisionLabs. I'll send out a follow-up email after this. Oh, we got one question. So I'm going to answer that first if you're still sticking around. Mike, deep dive on asking questions section. Oh, right. Everyone wants to know how to ask questions. Mike, would you mind just elaborating on like what your business vertical is? Are you in enterprise, lead gen, ecom, whatever else? I think that would be really helpful just to get that. But let me go back really fast. Boom. Okay. So here is the quick deep dive on this. I'm just going to build this out really fast here so we don't have to dive in here. All right, advertising. So why can I not? Sometimes technology just wants to fight. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So here's the idea behind this. And this is like how we can start with asking questions, either for yourself or for like clients if you are in advertising or if you're an ad tech platform, is what is the question that you're asking? And this is where things really start to get spicy because you can ask really bad questions, right? You could say, hey, how many people are pushing the button on blog post 7, right? And that question is inherently not useful unless you are the ability to take an action on it or know what you do with it. So this is the structure. And again, my friend Chris Mercer goes by Mercer over Measure U. He's the one who taught me this, so I'm not going to take full credit. But this is a really good structure on how you can do this. Is you can say, hey, question, information, action. And so this is where you can write down your question and say, hey, how many people, let's just say, which lead magnet is we know this. Which lead magnet is breaking even in 14 days? And we can change this here. And then what we can actually do is take this, and now what is the next thing? Oopsies. Whoa. Then we can say, okay, here's the information. And we can say, I need to know leads. I need to know sources. I also have to know the revenue from those leads. I have to know the spend to get the leads. All right. And that's about it, right? And then we might have to know a date of the lead. So that's the information that I would need, right? Mike, on this is like, ta-da, we have how many lead magnets are breaking even. Okay, this is going to drive me nuts here. Okay, there we go. And then the action is this, right? So if we are breaking even in 14 days on ad spend, then we will increase creative production, ad spend to push higher volume until 20-day break even. So that's a way that you can structure that, right? So now you have the question. Is that a good question or not? Like, this could be a terrible question. This, like, if I don't have the way to execute on this, we now know the information that we need to understand how we'd answer that question. And then we also know what action we're going to take based off of the information that we've gotten. Is like, if we are below 14 days, we're going to take those, we're going to push creative, we're going to push volume, and we know that it's going to affect performance because newer people are going to come in. But at the same exact time, we know what we're going to do, and we're going to push that up, and we're willing to go up to 20-day break even. We're not willing to go to 30-day, we're going to 20-day. And so now you have a very clear structure of knowing what to do based off the question that you were initially asked. I hope that makes sense, because that's how I think. And it really does. If you can get clients or if you can get your teams to really understand this, it cuts down on a lot of stupid questions, and it cuts down on a lot of people asking questions for the sake of questions, right? Like, hey, how are we doing on this? You're like, I don't know. It doesn't matter. So hopefully that's helpful. Rob, link to the Google Sheet where we collect questions. That I will actually, I'll email this to you, everybody here on the follow up. That's what I'm going to do. So I will email you guys a Google Sheet of like how we intake questions from clients, so that way we have a very good way of structuring it, and we can force their entire team to really suck down and make it really tight with their questions and their information and their actions. So that's about it, folks. Without any further ado, thank you so much for spending your hard-earned time with me for 45 minutes. I look forward to seeing you all on the internet. Don't be a stranger. Say hello. My name is JJ Reynolds, jj@visionlabs.com. And if you are interested, feel free to fill out an application over visionlabs.com/contact. I will see you around.